Hey everybody, welcome to community call number 41 with EthStaker. We're covering the Lido Community Staking Module, the Lido CSM today. We're really excited to talk to the Lido CSM participants, members. I'm not sure if we're going to call you the team. You guys can self-identify however you want. I will get to you on intros. We have the EthStaker team here, Remy, Torsten, aka York Down, Hani Abu, Sam Coffey, and Buddha. And then Jonathan is MWJ, I don't know, EthStaker community member. And then we have the Lido Community Lifeguards, NT and Sam, and we have Dima, who works a lot with the CSM. Would you guys like to introduce yourselves, you three? We'll start with Dima.
Yeah, sure. Hello. My name is Dmitry, or short version Dima. So I'm a technical leader of a team that's working on CSM, that is making CSM real. I mean, we are very close. There's in general 4 of us in the technical team. No, 5 of us in the technical team, and Sam and Isaac are helping us as community lifeguards. So since we are all like not a DAO members, but we are DAO contributors, I mean, at least my team. So we are somewhat independent, but we are united with the same goal to bring as many as possible independent operators to Ethereum. That's it.
Sure. Yeah, I can go next. Hey guys, Sam, also known as Takeosaurus here. So I'm one of the Lido community lifeguards, and I cover the Asia region. And what I do is basically I work on initiatives to expand the talent pool of solo stakers across Asia. As part of my role as a community lifeguard, we are independent grantees as well. And what we do is we support Lido community stakers, both existing and new ones alike, to across their journey while using the Lido Community Staking Module. And in doing so, this helps to grow the solo staker talent pool as well.
I can go. Well, similar to Sam, I'm one of the community lifeguards at Lido. I'm personally in charge of or overseeing Latin America. And just again supporting the growing community of solar home stakers in Lido, but also on broader Ethereum. I guess our goal or our wish is just to see Ethereum succeed in general, and that's why we do what we do.
Awesome. And I saw Takeosaurus just put together the home staking summit in at Token 49. That looked like it went really well. I was really excited to see CoinDesk cover Vitalik making comments about how important solo stakers are.
Yeah, likewise. I think it's Cointelegraph, if I'm not wrong.
Oh.
Instead of CoinDesk. But yes. And I'm glad Vitalik really enjoyed the conversation on the importance of solo stakers as well.
Awesome. I'm going to do some housekeeping first before we move into CSM stuff. I just wanted to talk about EthStaker is going to have a lot of community calls coming up. I have been the executive director of EthStaker for a little while now, but I am moving to the EF, which means that I'm trying to offboard some of my responsibilities, some of my roles in EthStaker to others. And so we will be having community calls coming up, and we encourage people to get involved, to ask for the agenda, to ask questions during the YouTube chat. I can tell you which community calls are coming up. Next week we have NodeSet. The week after that we have Puffer. After that, Steerium and the Ephemery testnet. If you guys, if anybody watching this call thinks of anything else that we should be covering, please propose it. We would love to cover it, especially if it comes from the community, it's something the community is interested in. And you can always find all of our events on ethstaker.cc/events. So Dima, I just wanted to ask you, what is your background? How did you get involved in staking? How did you get involved in the Lido CSM?
Well, you asked 2 questions. So I didn't
Sorry.
get involved in staking because I got involved in Lido together with my team. And I spoke a lot about it on a podcast with WAC, so I wouldn't dive too deep into this stuff. I just can say that Lido is the one and only crypto entity organization, or you name it whatever you like, a crypto project. I would say that's probably the best thing that I was involved in crypto. And actually, I'm very proud of it. I like Lido. I like Lido as a project. I like the team behind building Lido. I like a lot of things with regards to it. But we initially, when we joined as a team, we haven't joined as like smart contract developers or stuff like that, because how can you join crypto as a smart contract developers if you've never been in crypto before? So we made this transition gradually. So after year and a half, I guess, or approximately 2 years, being focused on security, on the off-chain stuff in Lido, we heard that there's a project on the horizon which would somehow involve community stakers and permissionless validation. And we were probably the first to raise the hand and say, hey, we are willing to take it. We are willing to take this challenge. And the rest said, okay, we do have a lot of other projects which are very important. So come on, give it a try. If you fail, okay, no problem. We'll replace you as a team, like some other team can pick it up. But luckily, we haven't failed. Yeah, and I really love the fact that we picked up this particular project, because from my own perspective, this is probably one of the most important things happening at the moment with Lido. I cannot say that it's the most important thing in general, but it is a very meaningful change, and I'm happy to be one of the drivers of this change.
Awesome. And just to orient the audience, the podcast that Dimo was talking about, where he went more into his history, was the Rocket Fuel podcast with Whack Whack Attack, who usually covers rocket pool stuff, but he's also been covering like wider ecosystem stuff since the Daily Gwei has been quiet for a little while. One follow-up question. What is your future vision for first Ethereum in general, and second for Lido?
Okay. Speaking of Ethereum in general, it is super hard to predict. I mean, we've seen a lot of discussions moving towards one direction, then radically changing direction, moving back and forth, up, down, and so on. So I think that at the moment, the most perspective direction for Ethereum is to become stronger and stronger as a base layer, which Ethereum is currently doing, and I support this idea. I do think that something can definitely be improved from the individual staker's perspective, because even though I believe that it is better to have support for individual stakers on a protocols level, because if you can have multiple protocols, you can have multiple implementations, meaning you can have competition, meaning that people can have a choice, while if you have it on a base layer, you cannot offer people choice. You can only offer them one thing. So I think even in this case, even in this particular thing regarding solo stakers, Ethereum should stay neutral, but some things might be improved. So for example, with the introduction of 7251, which makes it better for Ethereum, I mean, we can finally have less validators, but for solo stakers, it is basically useless. It is useless in terms of the fact that given that there's a protocols which might use this capital more efficiently. As a solo staker, okay, if you are like pure solo staker and you have this 32 ETH, well, you get this wonderful opportunity of waiting for half a year for your effective balance to flip from 32 ETH to 33 ETH. Hey, come on, but for this half a year, like almost half of ETH was sitting doing nothing, which from a practical perspective, like not super ideal. But what can be cool and what can be beneficial, I guess, for solo stakers of, this super OGs, is that I don't think that any one of them actually owns like 2000 ETH, but a lot of them do own like maybe 100, maybe 200 ETH. And in this case, if custom ceilings would ever be implemented, that would definitely be beneficial for them because they can estimate like what's the amount of ETH they own, where they want to set this line for SWIP, so that they can still get their rewards without like waiting or without paying for this partial withdrawals, which would be paid, which would not come without a charge. So this is one thing. Speaking of other things, it is hard for me to say. I'm just trying to keep up with the narrative, with the updates. I'm not that advanced at the moment to act like a prophet or to propose something new for Ethereum. Maybe one day, I hope. But it is you to join Ethereum Foundation today, not me. So yeah, I don't have that much to add here.
Yeah, thanks for that, Dimitri. I guess maybe getting into like the general Lido and like the community staking model as well, or module as well, like this idea of the community, and curious to get your thoughts on community principles and how Lido approaches that for the Lido community itself. And then, stemming from that also just wanting to understand from your all's perspective what that's like as a newcomer for someone who would be getting involved, in that aspect of Lido and being a node operator and what that's like, whether it be from support or the community at large, or, how people should think of that.
Yeah, sure. I guess the word community has multiple meanings, and we are probably seeing it from several different angles. So you are framing your question from the angle of a community in a traditional form. So a group of people united by same vision or by similar visions, goals, and so on. When we were thinking about branding, about the whole this initiative, and actually the very first step was the publication called Community Staking Manifesto. And in this publication, it is explicitly mentioned that we are using this term not to describe the community around the module, but instead to widen the term solo staker. Because when you tell someone, hey, we want to be focused on solo stakers, people usually do not they ask what does it mean to be a solo staker? Does it mean that you own your capital? Does it mean that you're staking on your own? Does it mean that you're sitting home alone with no friends and you're always solo? So we tried to widen the term a bit. And what is actually important, especially with the introduction of DVT, is that term solo staking is probably too narrow for Ethereum. And what is really meaningful is independent actors. And independent actors might not only be individuals, but might be groups. Take StakeCat as example, a group that has formed in Noble Discord while they were looking for someone to create a cluster with. They ended up as a very strong independent actor while being still somewhat a small community or group. So when we are speaking community and when we're using this term, I mean, when we're speaking about NT or SAM, we're calling them community lifeguards, which again, somewhat refers to this topic. So community staker, community lifeguard is the one to help community stakers. So that's a bit of a clarification about the term community. But in general, at the moment, if we are speaking about community as a common thing, as the common term, our community around CSM is actually very young. Let's be honest, we are not that super experienced in community building, like say Rocket Pool or EthStaker. So we are trying to learn from you guys, and we are not trying to pull the blanket towards our side. No, instead, we are just trying to create a supportive, friendly place where anyone can ask questions, where anyone can get support. We haven't had really hot topics to discuss yet. We haven't had strong fights or very rough conversations as you might regularly see in Rocket Pool. But I guess it's just because of the fact that the community itself is relatively small and hasn't developed that much yet. So again, summarizing all that has been said, community staking is called community staking because we are aiming at independent actors who might not only be individuals, but also groups and so on. And we call them community stakers to wind up the term. And our community around CSM is a very young community. And we are trying to build it as any other thing that we are doing with Lido on the principles of help, support, and on the principles of I want to be straightforward here. We want to build it on the principles of not shitting on each other. So shitting on each other is not allowed. We do not believe that this might be useful.
Can you, how would you define the independent actor? You put an emphasis on that. I just want to clarify what that means.
So it might be either individual or a group of people or it might even be a small entity, probably. I mean, by independent, I mean it is not a huge entity, or it might even be a huge entity. So independent means that it has like, okay, let me spot an example here. So for example, you cannot consider me and my team in the context of development as independent actors. We are acting as a team here. But if you consider us as individuals, you can consider us independent. So I cannot tell, for example, someone from my team, hey, you should not update your validator client, or I cannot influence on that. So that would probably be the definition of independent actors. So the actors that are not correlated with each other in terms of their goals, in terms of their decision-making process.
Okay, so freedom from coercion on how to run your validator.
Somewhat. So again, we are not independent when we are speaking about development process, because I can not enforce, but I mean, I do have a decision power on like how this or that feature can be done, even though we have a lot of freedom, but we cannot be considered independent. But in terms of running validators, we are all making independent decisions, and we cannot influence each other, or we cannot enforce each other to do something.
Cool. Let's move over. Can you give us a broad overview of what the CSM is? Because we've talked about like the principles and like why it's important, but for anybody who maybe hasn't heard of what the CSM is or like what the context is.
Yeah. So CSM is a very like ridiculously simple thing, actually. Lido is a liquid staking protocol, with the main goal of connecting both capital providers or ETH holders with the node operators. And at its inception, it was permissionless on one side and permissioned on the other side. So anyone could bring ETH, return it, exchange it into staked ETH, and then this ETH would be distributed between node operators. So the side of node operators was permissioned, and it was Lido DAO to decide which node operators would be onboarded, which node operators would be allowed to operate this stake. And CSM is changing this scheme. So CSM adds the ability to become node operator in a permissionless way, meaning that you only need to, if you are capable of providing this insurance or collateral or bond with as less as 1.5 ETH if you are early adoption member for the first validator, and 1.3 ETH for any validator moving further. Yeah, so if you can provide significant security here, or like again collateral, not security, but collateral, you are allowed to run validators. So Lido would supply the full deposit for your validator, full 32 ETH, while your collateral or bond would be locked in a contract, on a CSM contract, to be used as a compensation in cases of malicious or inappropriate actions from your side, like slashing or MEV stealing. That's it.
I have a question.
Sure.
When you say it's permissionless, isn't it still permissioned because the amount of ETH that's allocated to CSM node operators is still decided by the DAO? So yeah, am I right or wrong? or can you?
Well,
uh,
you're taking a pretty interesting angle here. I appreciate it. So no, I still think that the definition of something being permissionless is that you don't need to ask permission to join, but it doesn't mean that you have a 100% guarantee that when you will join or when you will stand in a queue, when you will take your place in a queue, you would definitely get the final result. So let's take a look at the grocery store nearby your house, for example. Imagine there's two people willing to go to the grocery store. I mean, okay, you're both allowed to go there. You don't need to ask for permission, and you will both be able to buy stuff there. And now imagine the situation when there's 100,000 people willing to go to the same grocery store, to one particular grocery store. I mean, it would still be permissionless because no one would stop them from going to this grocery store. But at the end of the day, the line would be so long that if you are in the middle or at the end of the line, you would probably not get anything in the grocery store because it would either be drained or closed or something like that. So I still think that CSM would indeed be a permissionless module, definitely with some limitations, but these limitations can be again viewed from different angles. So for example, we can say, if our protocol is just a protocol, one of the protocols in Ethereum, and we have a limited supply of ETH, but we allow anyone to join as node operators, for example, with a bond or without a bond, does it mean that our protocol is not permissionless? No, it does not. So I think that I still believe that CSM is indeed permissionless.
Yeah, I think then we just disagree because the supermarket example you brought also means that there was more demand than supply. But in your case, it's kind of like you put the limit, and if there is more demand than supply, it's still kind of permission. But that's how I see it, at least.
Okay, let me extend an example with the supermarket a bit because I would not stop here. Imagine there's a supermarket chain and all controlled by the same brand. And there's grocery store nearby your house is for some reason smaller than the others. Would that change my example with the grocery store? I don't think so. So as well as I mentioned in the final part of my previous answer, what if the protocol is just small? So setting up, again, Lido has a limited supply, Lido protocol has a limited supply of ETH. And no matter what share is, like it would eventually end up. So I don't think that it is permissionless. I do think that having the fact that this limitation exists is, I mean, it doesn't make it permissioned, but it does allow Lido DAO to decide which portion would be allocated or can be potentially allocated. This is important to note. And again, I like that you're raising these questions, and I really like that Nixo also asked me probably the same question in Berlin. And guys, come on. Lido is a relatively big protocol, whenever you like it or not. And when you want to make changes in such a big protocol, what would you like to see? Changes being rolled out gradually with an emphasis on security and robustness and reliability, or just a reckless, you only live once, let's make it all permissionless for 100%. I mean, this is the end game, yes. At the end of the game, there should be like somewhat of a balance between permissionless, bonded, unbonded, and so on. There's a very long road. But at the start, we should start low. And I would appreciate returning to this question when you will see that CSM is full, there's no capacity in CSM, and blaming Lido DAO is voting against raising share of CSM. At this moment, I would be happy to support this discussion. But for now, we are talking about non-existing things. So on testnet, we initially started with 5% and we raised it to 15% relatively fast when we saw that the cap was reached. And I would probably advocate for the same, and I would propose to the DAO, I would personally advocate for raising share of CSM if it is capped or once it is capped, for sure. especially during the early adoption mode, when it would be semi-permissionless and only identified solo stakers would be able to join, because that's the ultimate goal, to have as many as possible independent operators and not just create a cool thing for professionals.
And here I thought we were going to get through this agenda too quickly. But we'll move on from this. I do want to ask NT and Sam, because NT and Sam represent communities that are less well represented in staking. So I kind of want to ask their perspectives on how the CSM can enable validation from countries that aren't very well represented right now. We'll start with StakeSource because he unmuted first.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, I'm always excited to answer questions along this line. So I guess the obvious effect here is that by reducing the barriers to entry on the capital side, we enable people to who previously would not be well off enough to now participate in running Ethereum validators as a solo staker, as a home staker. But having said that, because there's two parts to the capital requirements. One is on ETH, the other is on hardware. Yeah, so the hardware costs, at the minimum 600 to 800 USD, and if you get a debt note, right, it's almost a double of that. Yeah, so there is still that hurdle that we have to solve for, but at least the capital requirements on ETH, right, is drastically reduced. Now, the secondary effect of that, right, is that those who have now like 4, 5, or even between 5 to 10 ETH, right, they not only can accrue experience on the test net, but they can now get real hands-on experience on the mainnet. Yeah, it boosts their confidence significantly when you make that shift. And also, you can now showcase your proficiency on an on-chain level. So it's kind of like a soulbound token, soulbound credentials that you can then use to showcase to, maybe a staking protocols that have, delegation programs. Lido has one such thing, like Simple DBT, and also EtherFi has a similar program like this. And then if you stretch this example even further, if you can run CSM together with DVTs on the mainnet, so putting the cost of hardware aside and let's imagine we are all doing this just to acquire accrue the credentials, right? Now your financial barriers to entry gets reduced even further, and now you make learning how to run Ethereum validators even more fun because you're doing it in a group rather than just yourself. So you can do this with like Obo, Scott Staking, or SSD distributed validators. So yeah, so both on the direct impact and the secondary effects of the CSM, both can boost the adoption of solo stakers in markets that are less well-to-do. NT, do you want to add anything from Latam?
Sure. Yeah. I think there's two sides to this. On one hand, you have sort of the architecture or the CSM tech that first is probably as close to vanilla staking as it gets. You only need to change like the fee recipient and the withdrawal address on the validator keys, and also it's very cheap. The latest risk assessment is targeting 2.5 Ether for the first validator if outside of early adoption, 1.5 if inside of early adoption, and then 1.3 for the subsequent ones, which for regions like Latin America or Southeast Asia, where the median income is usually lower, makes validating more accessible. And then on the other hand, you have sort of the social aspect of Lido on the CSM, which has allowed us, first of all, created the community lifeguards, and that has allowed us to go deeper, to have resources to support a lot of these communities, a lot of these individuals who maybe didn't even know about staking or that staking was a thing. And now we have the resources to go there to support them, and also to create guides in multiple languages or integrations with as much tooling as possible, just to make it easier and easier for anyone to spin up an Ethereum node and then start exploring the beauty of all this, I guess.
Thank you guys for your perspectives. Let's move on to specifics, because we've now spent half of the call talking about why the CSM is doing what it is. So Yorick, do you want to move on to some specific questions?
Yes, let's do that. So you want to talk about how we set this thing up? Was that?
No, so on the agenda, you're slated to ask about hardware and software.
Right, exactly. Okay, so what are the hardware? We already know it's not permissioned, right? We heard about the bond here. What are the hardware requirements for someone to run a CSM node?
Well, that's super simple. The main idea that we had in mind when designing CSM is that it should be as close as possible to vanilla validation. But what is important here, nothing stops people from using DBT or stuff like that. So if we are speaking about like you being one and only to run your validator, it is no different to a vanilla validation. And as you might have noticed from the PR that folks from Lido recently brought, and you even got it approved. Thank you so much for your comments and valuable insights. The setup process of a node is basically what you've done in EthDocker or what DAppNode done in their package, or the same thing that you're going to do with the vanilla setup, as Antti mentioned, with the only three differences being correct fee recipient, it should be Lido execution layer vault. Correct withdrawal credentials, it should be Lido withdrawal vault, because that's how the core protocol is built. So these two things should be so. And MEV boost should be set up and should only use relays that are in the Lido allow list, which is all relays except for those which are no longer supported. And Titan has not been vetted yet, but it's just a matter of operational thing. I think it would be vetted soon. So from the hardware perspective, no different to vanilla validation. And just to remind that currently, if you want to run a validator on a mainnet, you need a somewhat decent CPU, like at least for core, I guess, but that's the least important part. 16 gigs RAM minimum, 32 recommended, 2 terabyte SSD, but you will probably soon end up with not enough space. So 4 terabyte is the best option right now. And that's basically it. Same goes for CSM.
Right, perfect. And you briefly touched on software. Can you go over that maybe and talk a little bit about, I think I heard people can just set this up manually if they like, right? Any which way they want to run it. CSM does not mandate how you run the validators, just that you run them. Or there's packages that pre-package this. Which packages are available right now?
Oh, so yeah, as you mentioned, nothing specific is required. So no sidecars, no nothing. You can do a vanilla setup on your own, which is absolutely amazing. And we do have several integrations. The first thing definitely to mention, I mean, my most personally best is EthDocker. I adore EthDocker for the simplicity and neatness. I'm not trying to like to do additional compliments for you. That this is indeed the case. I do use EthDocker as the main thing. We also have DAppNode, and what is interesting here is that on a DAppNode there's no specific package for CSM. You just need to select Lido or CSM when importing keys, and that clearly indicates that nothing specific is required.
Right, so it just sets the execution layer address to you and checks that the withdrawal address is right.
Yes, yeah, and also checks the MEV boost. But again, there's no specific package, so you simply follow the default flow. Ethereum is available, also like absolutely amazing tool. Sedge, which is not that widespread tool, but it's tool developed by Nethermind.
Right?
Yeah, that's the Nethermind tool, and guys actually did a great job. I wish we would see more of a usage of this tool also. And so I've mentioned EthDocker, DAppNode, Sedge, Ethereum, EthPillar. That's the thing that was developed without like additional efforts or funding from Lido side. I guess there's a retroactive grant small for it, but guys did it on their own enthusiasm with their bare hands, and I really appreciate this. So we have like 5 integrations right now. Maybe there's something else that I'm not aware of, but these 5 are definitely worth mentioning.
Wonderful. I think EthPillar is CoinCashew, is that right?
Yes.
Wonderful. Great. So from
And
completely manual, go ham on the Linux command line to various forms of automation and integration, everything's available.
yeah, up to super visual tools like Ethereum and DAppNode, where you like basically need to know almost nothing about Linux, where you can simply set using clicks. So Sam and Antti did wonderful videos on how to do it on a DAppNode and on a Ethereum, and there's also a bunch of community resources and videos, including Spanish language, which I do like, because it's great to have content on a local languages about on how to set it on a DAppNode.
Got it.
Okay, and one just a tiny little note that it is also possible to use DVT with CSM, and like at the final minute before the audits started, we introduced this extended permissions for the manager address. I wouldn't dive deep into it, that it is described in documentation, but there's a special mode which you can set when creating node operator, which would allow you to manage your DVT operator in the neatest possible way. So you can use reward splitter natively with CSM. You can use multisig as the manager or EOA as the manager. All these cases are described. So we've tried to do our best to support all the crucial features for DVT while allowing it up to the user to decide if they want or don't want use DVT. And no matter what technology they want to use, they can use any.
Wanted to ask about the collateral and how that functions, and these questions about like if there's risks to be considering as a validator, CSM validator, like if the STETH depegs and it was used, as collateral, and then also around like what happens to vanilla ETH that it is used. Would that be converted? Like just understanding that component.
Yeah, sure. So let me quickly walk through this thing. So let's start with the risk. So first of all, there's no risk of STETH depeg because STETH is redeemable against ETH using contracts. It was the thing back in the day where there were no such a thing as withdrawals. Now with withdrawals, STETH cannot depeg, but what can happen with STETH is negative rebase. So instead of seeing increase in your STETH balance after the next Oracle report, you theoretically might see decrease, which is called negative rebase. And for this situation to happen, the amount of penalties over the 24-hour period should exceed, like drastically exceed, I would say at least like 1.5 times to make it noticeable, the amount of rewards. And the current amount of rewards acquired by Lido, by the validators operated on behalf Lido, is around 1,000 ETH, meaning that to get into this situation, around 1,000 validators, Lido, not Lido, but again, validators operated on behalf Lido should be slashed, or I would say even 1,500, so that the balance would decrease. From the risks perspective, it is like having collateral in CSM is literally the same as holding LST. So if you're holding STETH, or if you're holding RETH, or I don't know, OSETH, or any other LST, there's always risk of this balance going down, or the rate or the exchange rate going down in case of some severe issues, some severe slashings or stuff like that. So it is no different. What I want to highlight here is that in case of such event, what you might end up with is you might end up with the collateral being insufficient to cover your validators, so they can technically become unbonded. But since this event is not triggered by direct penalty application, your validators would not be requested to exit. And after EAP 7002 implementation, they would not be triggered to exit automatically, just because of the fact how it is designed. So the risk is just a usual risk of holding LST. And if you're not okay with it, there's, again, as I mentioned, it's cool that we have this implementations on the protocol level. And for example, within Rocket Pool, there's no LST risk, and I want to explicitly mention it. And there's other limitations and other implementation details, but Rocket Pool does not have this thing. At the same time, Puffer does have this thing because they also convert your collateral of to ETH into POF ETH. So we are like more or less the same here. Speaking of how funds are traveling, so you can supply ETH, STETH, or wrapped STETH. Then internally within a contract, it would be eventually converted to STETH. So ETH would be staked, wrapped STETH would be unwrapped, STETH would just be transferred, and it would be stored on a contract. And that's basically on the exit. You can again request it in a form of STETH, direct transfer. You can request contracts to wrap it first and then return wrapped STETH to you. So if you, for example, entered with wrapped STETH, you can exit with wrapped STETH, and STETH or ETH would never touch your contract or will never touch your address. Or you can request with STETH withdrawal, meaning that you will get withdrawal NFT directly from contracts. And again, if you want to avoid STETH exposure, or for taxation reasons or some other reasons, you don't want to have STETH on your balance or wrapped STETH on your balance, you can avoid it. And upon exit, you can always ask for withdrawal NFT, which is non-fungible thingy that can later on be redeemed for pure ETH. That's in a nutshell how funds are moving and what are the risks.
Okay. Thanks.
I feel like we covered the flow of STETH, which was the next item on the agenda then. It would be great to move into like the economics of what's going on. Buddha, do you want to take the next economics question?
Sure. I'm curious where the APR comes from.
That's super
The
simple.
APR.
So yeah. So you have your bond or collateral in STETH. So from the fact that your bond or collateral is STETH, you get this STETH APR by default. That's the first portion. And the second portion, the second part, and the more meaningful part, is a share of rewards or staking fees. So as you know, when you stake ETH with Lido, 10% of your rewards are distributed between Lido DAO treasury and node operators. And the ratio in which they split, like how much would Lido DAO treasury get, how much would node operators get, depends on the module. So for CSM, it is proposed to set the fee to 6%, meaning that 6% will be allocated to node operators, 4% will be allocated to Lido DAO treasury. And you will get this 6% of daily rewards of a full validator, so of a full 32 ETH validator. And this 6% of rewards of a full validator combined with this STETH APR, which is 90% of rewards, if we are comparing it to a vanilla staking, will in total give you somewhat like in the best, like if you have around 10 validators in your early adoption member, it would result in a APR multiplier of 2.37 compared to vanilla solo staking. So this commission on, even though this is just 6%, since it's a commission on a full validator and the amount of collateral you need to provide to run each validator is relatively low, results in a significant capital multiplier. But nothing comes from this guy. Everything is legit.
Nix, yeah.
The multiplier is
What do you mean it's temporary?
You said, sorry, I didn't fully listen to I was looking at the agenda, but the multiplier for what you're getting, is there an early adopter? Like, okay.
No, it's not temporary. It's just the result of a math. So again, imagine like depending on how much of a collateral you need to run a validator and what is the commission rate, you end up with different numbers with a different effective APR. So I would say, so again, on your collateral, you get this 0.9 of an APR, right? Because it's STETH. And then on the whole 32 ETH, you get 0.06. But since you've only provided like 1.5 or 1.3 ETH of a collateral, the effective APR multiplier is 2.73. And this is permanent. It would not be changed. I mean, it would only change if the bond would be changed, but I believe that with backtrade it will only be reduced, or if the commission will be changed. But again, there's no strict plans on it right now. So it's not
How
temporary.
does-
Now you will get it. Yeah.
Sorry. How does bad performance influence my rewards? Like, let's say I'm offline for a few days. Do my rewards still get smoothed out?
That's a good question. So there's a concept of a performance threshold, which might put you in one of two groups. You will inevitably get this STE-free base or STE-free rewards on your collateral, because I mean it's technically unfeasible to reclaim them back, at least on a regular basis. And this commissions, the 6%, you might either be eligible to get them or not. And it is defined by the fact if your validator is above or below the performance threshold. What is performance threshold? Performance threshold is a value, is the rate of attestations, which your validator should be either above or below. By rate of attestations, we are not including attestation effectiveness like delay or not. If attestation was ever included, so if it was not missed, it is counted as okay. There was an attestation. If it was never included, then it is missed. So we are taking the ratio of not missed attestations to total assigned attestations. We calculate an average value for the whole network. Then from this average, we subtract 5%, so we are lowering the bar. And then if you are above the bar, you are in the socialized pool. If you are below the bar, even though you might got some rewards, you would be excluded from this pool. So shortly speaking, if your I cannot say for sure, like if 2 days offline would exclude you from this distribution or not, because it heavily depends on how network feels overall. But if the network, for example, feels like 98% efficiency, 98% of attestation efficiency, which would probably be the case given the rough calculation of attestation efficiency, minus 5%, it would be, oh my God, 93, which means that you should have a basic uptime of 93% of the month, which result in something like you can be offline for how long? Around like 2.5 days on average. But again, it heavily depends on the network performance. And even in this case, you would only lose this premium, but your collateral rewards, basic LST rewards, would still be with you. There's plans to implement a more sophisticated measures, like to eject long time bad performing operators when 7002 would arrive, but it is still to be done, and we would probably discuss it later.
One of the next questions is if it's even feasible to run one CSM validator on a machine that, let's say, costs $2,000, because the rewards you would get would take ages to cover the costs. So I'm just curious what you think about it, because most of the marketing that I've seen was around DevNode, and DevNode is a bit expensive. Yeah, does it even make sense to run one validator in your opinion?
Well, it heavily depends on how you define does it make sense or not. So if you are aiming to run a validator for profit, no, running one validator would probably not be that profitable, because the amount of collateral is like relatively low. And even with this capital multiplier, it will indeed take you ages to repay the costs for the machine. But if you are willing to start low or just tap into validation, or for some reason you already have hardware, which definitely might be the case. For example, like everything except for SSD might be taken from your old gaming PC. Like even 10-year-old gaming PC would easily fit 32 gigs of RAM if it hasn't it already. And you would only need to buy SSD, which is 4 terabyte, like not that shitty SSD would cost you like from $200 to $250. Yeah. So
maybe I can add from a solo staker's perspective, right? So I guess economically, if you just run one CSM validator key, it's going to take you more than 2 years to pay back the cost of your hardware, of a minimal hardware that costs 800 USD. For that node, it's going to be even more expensive. You need, I've done the math before, so it's around 9.3 ETH of STE for bond provided to break even in a year. And for a debt node, and for an $800 device, it's going to take like 4.1 ETH of bond break even to in 1 year. And of course, we are assuming the price of ETH is at today's price, right? Once the price of ETH goes up, and you know the collateral will be worth much more, the rewards will be worth much more as well. But if we just focus on the financial incentives, right? Maybe we might be attracting the wrong people, right? So what CSM enables, like what I mentioned, right, is enabling aspiring solo stakers to showcase their proficiency in being solo stakers, being able to run Ethereum validators. Yeah, and that opens up a lot of new opportunities for them in the future, right? So we have seen things like Lido Simple DVT that has pure ETH delegation to proficient node operators, and EtherFi has a similar program. You know, I expect more ETH staking projects to launch similar programs as well. And yeah, so it's you know, it's an upfront investment in not just the hardware, but in acquiring this skill set. That's my view.
Great. Are CSM validators required to use an MEV relay?
Yes. So there's a common policy for the whole Lido validator set, which shortly stands as you should use MEV boost. You should only use vetted relays. You are allowed to propose a vanilla block in case the relays are not available. And to save a bit of a time, I will immediately comment here that yes, it is not feasible to precisely define if relays were available or not. So
But what does a policy mean? Like, is it recommended or do you somehow enforce it?
No. So I was about to comment. So again, I gave you the gist of the policy. So again, it states that you should use MEV boost. You should use only vetted relays, and in case they are unavailable, you are allowed to propose vanilla block. So that's the gist of the policy. And now let's let's see which things might really be enforced. So given that it is hard to define if this or that relay was really available, I would say that at the moment, there is no punishment for producing vanilla block, because it is not feasible to properly determine if the relay was available or not. The motivation behind using relays is to keep to enforce this proposer builder separation, and to ensure that validators are not building blocks in a way they want them to build it, that they are buying the blocks from the open auction, which is not controlled by the DAO, which has nothing to do with the DAO. So you can propose vanilla blocks. Yes, if you would only propose vanilla blocks, then I can assume that one day when the tech would become more sophisticated, there would be some measures to detect that you are not using MEV boost at all, and you would not be able to pretend that, oh no, I've been using MEV boost, but for some weird coincidence, relays were not available all the time. So by default, you should use MEV relays, and you should buy these blocks from the independent market. Yeah, that's the policy.
But how do you
should not
enforce it?
steal MEV. As I told you, at the moment, there's no real way to enforce it.
Okay, so somebody could turn off MEV boost and there would be no consequences.
Technically, yes. But again, as I told you, as technology progresses, you cannot say that it would last forever. So one day there would be a technology to determine that, and those who are doing so would probably have to change the way they are doing.
We're coming short on time, but I do want to ask this question. So post 7002 validator credential layer withdrawals. Could you eject a person who wasn't using MEV boost by the DAO saying like this person clearly isn't using MEV boost, every block is locally built, we're going to eject them?
It depends on a DAO decision. So since the DAO would have a control over the withdrawal credentials contract, if the proposal would be made, on-chain proposal, to eject any validator which with the withdrawal credentials pointing to this contract, yeah, this is theoretically possible. Are there any plans on implementing such a policy? No, I don't think so. I don't believe that someone would propose it.
So in that case, MEV boost isn't required.
It depends on a view angle. So according to the policy, it is required. It's like, again, let me spot a real world example. So imagine there's a law saying that you cannot, I have a great example, like amazing example. In one of the cities nearby Barcelona, it is stated in the law that you cannot pee in the sea. I'm not joking. That's the fact. But if you can imagine the way how this would be enforced, then according to your logic, since there's no way to enforce it, there's no such a law. But according to my logic, there is such a law, but there's no way to punish you or to detect that you're breaking this law. So with the MEV boost, we are currently in a somewhat similar situation. We're saying you should use MEV boost, and but in rare cases you're allowed to produce vanilla blocks, but there's no way for us to enforce you to do so. So that's like,
I think it's
yeah.
I think it's worth mentioning the CSM committee, like just in general, at least for the case of CSM, for particular cases or strange situations like this one where it is unclear, there's a CSM committee that can report. It's usually we would report or it would be more common to report bad behavior like changing the feed recipient, for example. But there can be edge cases where the CSM committee can report a node operator and then part of the collateral is locked and there's a challenge period where the node operator can make their case and see if they actually did commit any violation of the MEV policy or if they did nothing wrong and can continue with the validator responsibilities.
We are at the hour, so I'm going to push us forward. Sam, do you want to, we have a POAP for this call. Sam, do you want to go over the POAP details for this call?
Yeah, sure. Remy, are you able to present a slide?
Yep,
let me know if it's already up.
online.
Okay, awesome. So hopefully you can see the details here. There's a POAP available. We're experimenting with some new distribution methods at POAP, and for this one, to get the POAP for this call, if you would like it, you can send 0.001 ETH to poap.ethstaker.eth. There are additional details on the slide in front of you, but this works on mainnet, Arbitrum, Optimism, or Base, and then you should be receiving your POAP in just a few minutes. So this is a slightly better method than we've used in the past, where you had to wait a couple of days until the submission period is ended. You should get it right away. And I hope you enjoy the new experience.
Dima, Steaksaurus, NT, I really want to thank you guys for being here. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you want to really quickly cover?
There's no way to really quickly cover all the things that we haven't covered. So my call to action would be very simple. We do host, I mean, not mostly Sam and Isaac, host roundtables in Lido Discord. So there's a place where, not like this call where it is more or less curated, but it's a place where anyone can join, anyone can unmute themselves and ask any questions. So my call to action would be for those who are willing to learn more about CSM and who are willing to ask questions, like any questions, even such a challenging questions as you did, Nixa. Just come and join our next roundtable. I'm not quite sure about the date, but probably Isaac knows. Isaac, could you spot when would be the next roundtable?
The next one is next Thursday at 4 p.m. UTC.
Perfect.
At the same time as this call.
Yeah, 4 p.m. UTC. Okay, cool. Yeah. Then for those who are willing to learn more, come join there. And from my side, huge thanks, guys, for having us here. And we are, I mean, yeah, huge thanks. We are happy. I'm happy.
Yeah. Thank you so much
Yeah,
for coming
thanks.
on.
Thank you.
I want to reiterate that we have calls every week coming up for the next 5 weeks. Nodes at Puffer, Ethereum, Ephemery. If you want to get more involved, if you want to be on these calls, please come to the EthStaker Discord. Let us know. If you want to propose new calls, please come propose calls. Thank you guys, Lido CSM, so much for joining us, and thank you everybody else for joining.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank
Have
you.
a good day, guys.
Bye.
Thanks
Bye.
all.